All right, this is tape number 25, and our theme today is states. Why do we need states? And at a more basic level, you know, what is this? Why are we even talking about states? Well, it goes back to the concept of federalism. Remember what I said in tape number 24. The people give power to the states, and the people give power to the national government. So, because of that, we need to spend a little bit of time on states. This, in the end, is a class on American national government, so we're spending almost all of our time on the national government. But this is the one tape, the one day we talk about the states, okay? So it's very simple. Why do we need states? What good are they for? Okay? And, there's a certain bias in that question. It's like, some people say, why do we need the national government? What good is it for? We should just have states. Well, again, it goes back to the framers of the Constitution. They deliberately rejected a confederation. They tried that in the Articles of Confederation. It didn't work. So they said, we need this new system. We need states. We're all from states. But we also need the national government. So then that leads to the question, why do we need states? Okay, well, the simple reason, there's actually a couple of reasons, but one of the very simplest things is, states allow us to have government help at a local level. Okay, it's really, really simple. The idea here is that our local issues should be handled by local people. Okay? And by local, I mean city, county, and also at the state level. To the framers, they looked at the states as, in essence, the local government. Let's be honest. Here in the state of Texas, cities and counties are simply the arms and legs of the state government. So the idea is very simple. Local issues should be handled locally. They should be handled at the state level or at units of the state, cities, counties, water districts, whatever, school districts. They should be handled at that level and not go to Washington, D.C. Okay, so, you think about all sorts of different things that go on and you look at issues. One of them is that there are some places where you want to do something with roads, okay? And you want to have roads that deal with local issues, okay? So, Sales Boulevard, right outside of campus, okay? At one time, McMurray University was talking about the possibility of putting a pedestrian bridge over it. So you step out of Cook, you cross over on this bridge to the parking lot at Aldersgate Church. Okay? Very simple thing. It saves a lot of people. Instead, now they have a light and crosswalks and all that stuff. Well, the original idea was to have a bridge over it. Well, you think that's a local issue. Well, it turns out, no. Sales Boulevard is part of a network of roads that have some federal jurisdiction involving it. So for us to get that bridge over there, we would need to go to the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. And I just have this image of a bureaucrat sitting behind a desk in an office on the 26th floor of the Department of Transportation. And this bureaucrat has no idea what's going on in Abilene and just sits there with the stamp and says, reject, reject. And that would be it, because that bureaucrat doesn't know what goes on here and how, having the bridge there would be a really good idea. Okay? That is why you need states. So you have local things decided by local efficiency. And of course, if you do that, not local efficiency, you have things decided by local governments, local people. There's nothing better than having the bureaucrat here in the city or with the state of Texas, just driving by the road, taking a look at it, being there during rush hour, and going, yeah, maybe that bridge is a good idea. Okay? What else? There's another idea. Remember the principle of limited government? The idea is that you limit the powers of government and you have a sharing of powers. So you use political control to control political power. Use political power to control political power. Well, here you have the states with some political power. You have the national government with some political power. The idea is that neither have absolute power. So there is a balancing act that takes place. All right? Another thing why we have states is that states are experimental. Okay? States try policies. You think about it and you go, how do we actually try different ideas to solve problems? States can do that. I would argue that states are laboratories to try to solve different problems. State of Texas is very blunt about it. We use the death penalty as a way to experiment in the idea that severe punishment will cause less crime. Okay? That is our experiment. Other states are doing different experiments. Okay? They don't have the death penalty. So they're trying to control crime in a different way. Here in Texas, now we say, hey, you kill somebody, we might kill you. Okay? That's an experiment. Okay? And we leave it to the politicians to decide if that experiment is successful. Another thing, when I used to live in Georgia before I came here, Georgia created scholarships called Hope Scholarships. New Mexico now has the same thing. And a Hope Scholarship was very simple. The idea was that buy lottery tickets, okay? You buy lottery tickets, you keep that lottery money in the state because that lottery money goes for education. So the more education dollars that are created, the more you can do with state education. So in Georgia and in New Mexico, the plan was very simple. Free college. If you go to a public school, free college. And you could do that because enough money was created from the sale of the lottery. So buy those lottery tickets because you could go to college for free. Okay? That was the idea. It's called Hope Scholarship. Here in Texas, way back when the Texas Lottery was created, and that was before I got here, it was very simple. They sold the lottery on the idea that the money would go for education. Well, people bought it, but the law as written did not say explicitly that the money had to go for education. So as a consequence, the lottery money goes for a lot of other things as well as education. Okay, so what we've got is that we have a whole bunch of different laboratories, 50 different laboratories, each of them trying out their own ways to do things. And as a consequence of that, we can get an idea of what works and what doesn't work. And if we see something working really well in Louisiana, we can adopt it for our own purposes. And if we see something really does not work out in California, we don't do it. Okay? As an example of that, the state income tax. California has a state income tax. Texas does not. And the argument is, who has a better climate for people? Well, people are starting to leave California and they're starting to come to Texas. Okay? I'm an example of that. Started in California, ended up here in Texas. And I like the idea that I don't have to pay a state income tax. It's a nice thing here. Okay? So, that's why we need states. It's a way to have efficiency in government. It's a way to experiment. It's a way to have local control. Okay? Now, last thing we need to talk about in terms of state government. Okay? And this is a principle. I'm going to write it out. We've been talking about federalism. This is called creeping federalism. Okay? So the idea is the people give power to the people, to the states, and people give power to the national government. And they're supposed to be equal. Well, it turns out that starting basically during the Great Depression, 1930s, with something called the New Deal, which Franklin Delano Roosevelt really pushed on through Congress onto the American people, there has been a clear movement of power from the states to the national government. The national government clearly now has more power than the states. Okay? Creeping federalism. And how did this happen? It happened in a very simple way. The national government can go into debt. We've talked about the U.S. debt. After the coronavirus, it's now about $26.7 trillion. Can Texas have a debt? No. Texas has to have a balanced budget. What comes in goes out. You can't spend money you don't have. The national government can spend money it doesn't have. So as a consequence, the national government has a lot more money than the local governments, than the state governments. So if the local governments want to do things, they have to get the money from the national government. Building, as an example, building an interstate, incredibly expensive. If you want highways, you're going to need federal money. And you go, okay, how is that creeping federalism? Well, it turns out the federal government will give you the money if you do certain things. And this is called a categorical grant. The federal government will give you money if you follow their rules. So, I was talking highways a little while ago. Well, the federal government wanted to give money to states for highways, but this was happening when I was in college. What it was concerned about was there was a drinking age that was all over the place. 18 years in some states, 21 years in other states. So it said, hey, we'll give you a lot of highway money if you set the drinking age at 21. So the states had a dilemma. Do they set the drinking age higher to 21 because they need the money? Or do they just say, we don't want the money? Well, it turns out all 50 states wanted the money. So the drinking age was raised to 21 across the country. That's a categorical grant. You get the money, but there's rules that are attached to it. Now, there's stories every now and then that Louisiana is looking at that fact that it is not getting as much money as it wants, and it's losing revenue from not being able to sell alcohol to people under the age of 21, and they're thinking about whether that money is worth it or not. And they're just thinking maybe we'll reject the categorical grants. That's their choice if they want to do that. They are simply saying no to categorical grants. Now, I'm speaking very generally here, but there's a different kind of grant that you sometimes see, and this is called a block grant. And a block grant typically comes when there's a Republican Congress and a Republican president. And what it is basically, here's a bunch of money, go spend it any way you want to. So these states really like, because, hey, there's freedom. You get money and you don't have to worry about all the rules. So they do that. But, and here's the but, sometimes they spend the money stupidly. Okay? Categorical grant, you have to follow the rules. So that's sort of a guarantee, if you will, that you're going to spend the money the way you're supposed to. A block grant, there's really nothing that guarantees you're going to spend the money smartly. So, there's a story that came out, and this is probably about 20-something years ago. Very simply, block grant to fight drugs. Okay? And a sheriff, I think it was in Louisiana, said, I'm going to fight drugs. I'm going to get me an M1A1 tank. That's the M1A1 Abrams tank, which is the huge tank that we have, like 65 tons. He was going to get it, And people asked him, what are you going to do with it? He says, I'm going to drive that tank right up to people's homes, those drug dealers, and I'm going to lower that turret, the gun turret, right on that tank, and I'm going to stick it right up against the front door, and I'm going to say, come out with your hands up. And they're going to quit dealing with drugs. They're going to come out with their hands up, and they're going to jail. So, Block Grant, he got the money for the tank. He bought the tank. Okay? No questions asked. He got the tank, discovered, oh my God, the tank is too big. It's too heavy for the roads in the county. It just churns up the roads, just ruins them. He can't drive the tank at all. So the tank ended up sitting at the county courthouse. The money was wasted. So, block grants, free money, but sometimes people spend it stupidly. Categorical grant, hey, there's categories, there's rules you have to follow if you get it. So you lack local control. Okay, so this concludes what I want to say about states. Keep in mind, creeping federalism is a real thing. Because the federal government has money, it's taking power away from the states. It's saying, hey, here's money for healthcare. Here's money for education. Here's money for transportation. Here's money for this. Here's money for that. And the states are getting this money, but it comes as categorical grants, and they have to follow the rules. So the federal government is able to put rules on the states that they have to follow. All right? So this concludes the last tape of the second section of the class. This is tape number 25. So what you all need to do is you need to now have watched tapes 13 through 25 and complete those by the week of October 26th. And we'll have exams, our next exam, that week of October 26th. Okay? So, thank you very much. See you in class.